In this video, we're going to show you how to replace the inner wheel seal on your Toyota Tundra. Once you're done with this job, take your car to a local shop and have them do an alignment. Remove the center cap using a flathead screwdriver or a plastic trim tool. Using a 21mm socket, remove the 6 lug nuts. Remove the wheel. Using a 12mm socket, remove the bolt for the brake hose bracket. Using a pair of pliers, pinch the clips on the ABS wire and pull that out of the bracket. Pull that to the side. Using a 17mm socket, remove the caliper bolts. Remove the caliper bolts. Suspend the caliper somewhere where the hose will have no pressure on it. I'm going to use a hook on top of the control arm. Like that. Using a 10mm socket, remove the bolt for the ABS sensor. Remove the ABS sensor. Remove the rotor. If you use a hammer, make sure you use a soft-faced one so you don't damage the rotor if you need to reuse it. Remove this cap. I'm going to use a flat chisel and a hammer. Go in between. Remove the cap. Remove the cotter pin using a pair of wire cutters. Just kind of bend it up. You could use just a pair of pliers too. Remove the cotter pin from the axle. Remove the castle nut cover. Using a 35mm socket, remove the axle nut. Push the axle in and make sure it floats freely inside of the splines. If it doesn't, hit it with a soft-faced hammer. Using a 10mm socket, remove the bolt for the ABS wire bracket. Open this bracket up and pull it off of the control arm. Remove the cotter pin off the top ball joint. Ours is not going to come out, so what we're going to do is we're going to chop all of it around. We're going to get it to a point that I can fit a socket on top of here, and we're going to pull the nut off, and then we're going to drill the cotter pin out. Using a 19mm socket, remove the top nut. Using a drill bit or a punch, try and remove the cotter pin out of the ball joint. Before hitting this, to remove the stud, thread a nut on just a few threads. We're going to release the ball joint from the stud. We're going to hit right here with a hammer and try and shock it and make it pop up. Once you break the tension on the upper ball joint, leave the nut on for now. Using a 17mm socket, remove the 4 bolts out of the ball joint. There's 2 more on the front. Remove the upper ball joint nut. When you do this, do not let go of the knuckle. Lift the knuckle up. Push the splines of the axle through. Using a small chisel, you're going to get under the wheel seal. Try and pick it up. Pry up and remove the old wheel seal. Install the inner wheel seal. When you're installing the seal, you only want to hit this inner ring. If you use a punch or something on this edge, make sure it's nice and flat. Try not to mess up the seal at all and avoid hitting the rubber. Install the knuckle back into the car. We're going to thread our top nut on, just a few threads for now, and snug it down after. But now the knuckle won't fall out on us. Start these bolts by hand. Do the same thing on the other side. Snug the bolts down. Torque the ball joint bolts to 48 foot-pounds. Snug down the upper ball joint nut. We're going to torque that to 77 foot-pounds. You can go up to an additional 60 degrees to find the hole to be able to put the cotter pin through. Install the cotter pin, bend it up over, and I'm going to trim off that backside. Install the axle nut washer, and install the axle nut. Make sure the axle is pulled all the way through and the splines are lined up. Snug down the axle nut. Torque the axle nut to 173 foot-pounds. We're going to use a pry bar to hold the studs while we do this. Install the castle nut cap. And install the cotter pin. We're going to bend the cotter pin up. I'm going to cut this tab off. Install the rotor. I'm going to temporarily install a lug nut just to hold the rotor on while I install the caliper. Install the caliper. Install the caliper bolts. Tighten down the caliper bolts. Torque the caliper bolts to 90 foot-pounds. Install the bolt into the knuckle. Ours broke, so we now have a through bolt for ours. And snug it down. install the ABS sensor. Using a 10mm socket, we're going to tighten the screw down. Install the ABS clip into the brake hose bracket. Install the bracket back to the knuckle. Put our bolt back in. Remove the lug nut we temporarily installed to hold the rotor on. Install the cap. Tap it with a soft face hammer. Put on your 6 lug nuts. Snug them down in a star pattern. Torque your wheel in a star pattern to 83 foot-pounds. Install the center cap and snap it into place.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.